Greetings and welcome back to Gadfly Academy. Today we continue our book study of Paul Kingsnorth's Against the Machine on the Unmaking of Humanity, and I will offer a few reflections on chapters 9, 10, and 11. Hi there, quick ad for the You Are Not a Machine Gadfly Academy merch store, which is now open. You can find the link in the show notes. We have t-shirts like this one, lighter colored hoodies. So all sorts of great stuff, coffee mugs, hats, etc. So if you are looking for Christmas gifts for the tech skeptic in your life, the merch store is the place to go. And if you want to support this work too. Take care. Enjoy the rest of the video. In chapter 9, Kingsnorth clarifies what lies at the heart of the machine in the modern revolution. The enthronement and pursuit of money as the ultimate value, and the cause of this situation is insatiable human greed. Here's a quote from the book. So this is who we are. You don't have to be a Christian or a Buddhist to see where it has led us, and where it will lead next. Want is the acid, capitalism is the battery, growth is the engine. Greed is the forming energy that moves us to where we are inevitably headed. What is the brake? The answer is, as hard as it is old-fashioned, limits. Modernity is a machine for destroying limits. The ideology of the machine, the liberation of individual desire, sees our world as a blank slate to be written on afresh when the old limits of nature and culture are washed away. This is our faith, that breaking boundaries leads to happiness, that boundaries are barriers rather than opportunities. We strain against all limits. It is who we are. That's from page 99. So, a central question underlying many of the culture war issues is there such a thing as human nature, or is human nature a fiction? And are we simply beings in the process of evolution? How one answers this question will determine whether or not one regards the situation of humans in the modern world as dire, or simply as in process. Most people, of course, do not ask these kinds of questions, nor, if they did, would they be able to answer them definitively one way or another. Each of us knows, at very least at a subconscious level, that humans are limited. We have a specific DNA, we must obey the laws of gravity, and so on. At the same time, we are often tricked into thinking that perhaps humans could live limitless lives through technological improvement, quote unquote, through uploading our consciousness to the cloud, whatever that means, and so on. This temptation is the one that has led to the modern world's destruction, to the extent possible, of limits. What goes up must come down, however, and we all know, on some level, that humans cannot live beyond the limits in which we find ourselves. We also know that something is wrong in the world in which we find ourselves. We are creatures that live in a certain time and in a certain place, and we actually miss the boundaries that have been destroyed, which helped us to orient ourselves. Instead, we have been tricked into believing that true freedom, quote unquote, is to fly, limitless, quote unquote, through a kind of outer space, spinning directionless, with no sense of up or down. Just as children need boundaries to feel safe, so adults require boundaries to orient ourselves, to feel safe, and to provide structure to our lives and world. Here's another quote from the book. I'm no Marxist, but the Communist Manifesto describes the world we are in with brilliant prescience, despite being written nearly 2 centuries ago. The mass consumption of the world and the mass excretion of our culture's toxic byproducts into its waters in woods and skies is the natural conclusion of the world which Marx and Engels saw being born, and which they pinioned in words so well. Once the bourgeois revolution had cleared the ground of awkward obstacles like the peasantry, the artisans, common land, local cultures and traditions, family and home life, a sense of history and mutual obligation, and religions which preached against wealth and worldly power. Then the captains and priests of the machine could get on with the work they were made for, the work of our time, the holy effort to which all human will, skill, and energy is now bent, making money. That's from page 94. I've mentioned this before, but I think it bears repeating. Just because one criticizes capitalism, it doesn't follow that one is a communist. Just as communism is a deeply flawed system, capitalism has a great deal of flaws that are worth discussing. Clearly, the quote-unquote solutions proposed by communism have been an abject failure. That said, there are many unappreciated problems of capitalism that require serious consideration. And since most of us live in capitalist societies, it's only appropriate that we do so. Historically, in the West, there has been very little serious criticism of capitalism outside of academic circles. This was perhaps understandable during the Cold War, when capitalism was sold to the West as the only viable bulwark against the horrors of totalitarian communism. As the consequences of unbridled capitalism become increasingly apparent, however, it's necessary to ask probing questions about the limits of capitalism and to what extent humanity is served by unbridled capitalist economies. In Chapter 10, Kingsnorth revisits the process by which capitalism came to dominate the modern world. In Kingsnorth's telling, it becomes clear that the process was not a natural or quote-unquote evolutionary one, but one that required the imposition of brute force. Here's another quote. The new nation of America, according to its leader, was best described not in terms of its values, its history, its spiritual beliefs, or the makeup of its people, but by how much gold and silver it could produce and how fast its ships could move. America was expanding, and it intended to trade with Japan whether Japan wanted it or not. America had not come to Japan on a cultural exchange trip. It had come to break open new markets for its goods and to inject its commercial attitudes into a country which had always held those attitudes in contempt. Feudal Japan was a nation which kept its merchants and traders at the bottom of the social pyramid, while the United States placed them at the apex. If Japan was a hidebound ancient nation, America was a newly incorporated business, and it had ambitious plans for expansion, plans which involved spreading its core values of individualism, commerce, and competition to every corner of the globe. That's from page 103. As the saying goes, history is written by the victors, and the great danger in this is that the history that one is taught tends to leave out all the inconvenient and unsavory bits. There is much that is lost in one-sided historical accounts, but perhaps most importantly in this case is that the bits that get left out of our great myth of progress are the bits about what has been lost in the process. As Kingsnorth mentioned at the beginning of the book, here's another quote from the introduction, most of the things you like are fading away, the great forests and the stories made in and by them, the strange cultures spanning centuries of time, the little pubs and the curious uninhabited places. End quote. And that is from page 14 in the introduction, XIV. Each new generation is born into an increasingly matrix-like world, and most are unaware of the beauty of the things that have been lost. Kingsnorth realizes that there is no returning to some kind of Edenic past. The path forward, then, is to revisit the values, stories, and belief systems that generated the great cultures that have been lost. Humans are creative beings, and when unencumbered by the technocratic straitjacket we've allowed ourselves to be shackled by, we have the capacity to generate new, beautiful, and vivifying things. As Kingsnorth says elsewhere, if the machine is a story, there's another quote, then the first step to its dismantling is neither monkey-wrenching nor revolution. It is to stop believing the story. The second step is to stop telling it to others. And the third is to begin the search for a better one. And that's from page 42. In chapter 11, Kingsnorth introduces Jacques Ellul's idea of technique, which he describes as, and here's another quote, an attitude of mind, one which replaces spontaneous human-scale, organic ways of living with a focus on technical, rationalized, planned, and directed outcomes. Technique is not the same thing as technology. Humans have always used technologies, or at least tools, but for most of history they have been designed to augment human work rather than to entirely replace it. Technique, on the other hand, when it is taken up as a way of seeing, gives birth to an entirely new type of technology, one which exists to remake the world in the image of technique itself, the kind by which, today, we are all increasingly enslaved. It's from page 116. As should be increasingly clear, the quote from Wendell Berry with which Kingsnorth begins the book sums up our situation well. Here's the quote from Wendell Berry. "It is easy for me to imagine that the next great division of the world will be between people who wish to live as creatures and people who wish to live as machines." End quote. The temptation, of course, is to stick one's head in the sand. Although the modern world creates an inhuman level of anxiety, we are tempted by its illusion of safety. But if we are so safe, why are we so anxious? And of course, we are addicted to its material comforts. As I have written many times before, happily we do actually have a considerable amount of agency as to the way we live our lives. The question, of course, is do we have the willpower to live differently than the way we currently live? This is why Kingsnorth repeatedly discusses the importance of the stories we tell ourselves. If our story is honest about our situation, truly honest, then we will be better equipped to deal with the reality in which we find ourselves. Most of us, alas, live by stories that ensure that our heads remain in the sand. The other thing that Kingsnorth discusses is the need for community. Living life in a way that is in opposition to the prevailing machine culture is nearly impossible to do alone. And I wanted to end with one last quote from the book. "Once it is set in motion through the technological network it itself brings into being, technique will inevitably move towards the construction of a whole society framed by its values. If the Industrial Revolution of the 18th century represented the replacement of human muscle by machinery, it could be said that the digital revolution of the 21st represents the replacement of the human brain by the developing digital overmind. This does not require a global conspiracy or a wizard behind the curtain. There is no wizard. There is no curtain. There is only technique, which, quote, has become autonomous. It has fashioned an omnivorous world, which obeys its own laws and which has renounced all tradition. Technique no longer rests on tradition. Its evolution is too rapid, too upsetting to integrate the older traditions." And the last bit was a quote from Jacques Ellul. So that's from page 117. So that is it for today. I hope you are enjoying Against the Machine and finding that it provides a fresh perspective for understanding modern culture and history. I'm really pleased, as always, to have you along for the ride, and I look forward to connecting with you moving forward. Please join us again on Thursday evenings at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time for our chronological book study of Kingsnorth's book on the Gadfly Academy YouTube channel. Also, if you'd like to join my thematic book study of Kingsnorth's book, I'm looking at theological topics from the book, kind of from a theological perspective. That happens Monday evenings at 7:30, and also on the channel. Finally, for a very limited time, you can purchase Gadfly Academy and You Are Not a Machine merch in time for Christmas. We have t-shirts, hoodies, coffee mugs, hats, and more perfect gifts for the tech skeptics in your life. Also, good way to start conversations with family and friends over Christmas. If you haven't already, please sign up for our updates and download the How Did We Get Here reading list at the link below. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you again next week. Take care.